are today. We're examining a pine tree, Pinus Halepensis, the Aleppo pine, a Mediterranean pine that has been installed here in California. The tree is well chosen for the site, and the tree is actually in very good health. It's doing quite well, strong on the site, and part of the urban forest here. Our observations here are dealing with the accumulated needs that have built up in the tree. And so as we look at the tree, we can examine the main structure and form and canopy and scaffold and see where the need is. And in this case, we're going to do a target pruning. We're going to address the key needs of the tree. So we're going to look for those cuts that represent the targeted cuts that will improve the tree's health, form, and beauty and longevity. If we examine here, we can see there has been some shade out dieback within the interior of the tree. These branches are not going to resprout. There's no new needles coming on board here. So to focus the tree's energy and keep the tree vigorous and healthy, we want to remove what interferes with ideal health. We have a host of cuts to be made. Most of them revolve around what we call shade out dieback. Material like this where the tree has withdrawn energy from structures that are not receiving sufficient light to keep them vigorous. And so they've begun to shade out and die back. Here are some of our targeted cuts. The tree is really directing the pruning. We're removing from the tree what interferes with ideal health. And of course our number one targeted cuts are the deadwood. We find that a lateral limb that was arching down to the roof was cut off in order to free the roof contact. But the branch needs to be recut at the correct location. What we have now is about a 4-foot long stump that cannot resprout or become part of the future canopy of the tree. So we're going to excise this whole limb from the tree. We're going to take it in a couple of cuts so that we don't peel bark. First we're going to lighten it up, get some of this bulk off, and I'm going to grab a hold of it here as I finish the cut. So our finished cut is going to be made right about here. A little bit of a difficult cut. We're going to have to cut from underneath due to the healthy live limb above it. So we're going to excise from underneath and make our cut here. Here's our finished excision right here. We have a live lateral that is still vital and we're going to keep. And of course our main stem is very significant and strong and healthy. And of course we're going to retain this. Just the deadwood was excised to the branch collar. With the pine tree, many times we're not so concerned about treating the end grain with orange oil beeswax because the pine is a very good healer. And so small cuts, say 1 inch or 2 inches in diameter, are perfectly within the tree's capability of healing. But what we will do sometimes is when we make a large cut, say 3-4 inches in diameter, and after the cut has been made, 10-15 minutes later, sapping out will occur in the vascular system, and we'll just take our fingertip and just smear the pine resin over the end grain of the cut. We're going to use the tree's own sap to help cope with this wound. We're just going to smear this around and cover the whole end grain. This is a wound that will completely heal. The tree will be able to cope with this wound nicely. Pine trees are actually very good healers, and a reasonable cut will almost always heal. An unreasonable cut can be a death cut for even the mighty pine, but if reasonable cuts are made in the right locations, pines are good at healing themselves up. Our little mitigation to smear the sap around the end grain of a wound just assures that that does not turn into a decay site. If we look further into the tree's canopy, we can see that more of these shade out dieback limbs are now visible. Now we've cleaned out some of the material screening our site and we can see where all the dead tissue is. The important thing is that the tips of the laterals and the leaders are still alive. The leading tips are vital, the meristems are vigorous and healthy. So this is just an accumulation of dead wood. The tree has stood on the benign neglect management style. Very little pruning has been done, just a cut here and there to keep the building from being abraded by the tree. Otherwise, the tree has stood here unmanaged for many years. This accumulation took a while to build up. So we're getting caught up. This should last for several years, 4 or 5 years without attention should be fine for a tree like this.